You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
In a cosmos where perfection underlies appearances, protectiveness is not a true frequency. Replace protectiveness with trust. And that's some wisdom from the mystic and seer Almin. Hello everyone, you are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa's online broadcast for Thursday the 26th of January. If you're listening to us live, thank you very much. Please stay with us tonight. If you're listening on podcast, please send us some comments. We'd love to hear from you. In the show tonight, we're going to talk about principles of fullness. We're going to talk about sinkholes in the Cape. We're going to talk about coronations and children's dreams. We're going to be discussing about losing aspects of our childhood. And we're going to be talking about everything that is waiting for you and for me as we process through the stage of ascension and evolution that we are all experiencing. My name is Paul, I'm your host for the show, and co-hosting with me tonight is fellow beautiful master Diane. How's it, Diane?
Hi Paulie, hi everybody out there that's locally and overseas.
It's great to have everybody with us tonight again, and thank you for joining us. This is, as we progress into 2017, Diane, I think we're in for a huge change in the concepts. Are you feeling the same as I am, is that the theory of things that we've understood are no longer theory, that it's like so blatantly in one's face of things that we have to now master and step up to, that there's just no way we can avoid those things. Are you feeling that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you absolutely, that in the past it's been quite not easy, but it's been achieved quite easily. One can look away and wait for the perfect timing. But now, of course, we realize there is no perfect timing. And that was a huge insight for me, that perfect timing phrase is really just an illusion that has come along with the Matrix.
And it's also part of today's cosmic mantra, I think, about working with perfect timing and knowing that you only have this moment of perfection anyway.
The spontaneous flow. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is part of the mantra for today.
I think there is a process that goes on for many of us, that we do the work that we need to do, and it's an ongoing process, but then we wait for the results. And whilst we wait for the results, we stop doing inner work. Yes. It's a bit like the cause and effect thing. And I know, I've been taught teachers that's all gone. But I think what we are still learning to do on a practical level is learning that has gone, and we've got to let go of the memory of that the cause and effect syndrome has gone completely. We are just the simple cause of everything that unfolds and
in our environment.
So that's a bit of a bite to take sometimes when things or people are still in the old memory or old programming.
Well, it's interesting because I thought I understood surrendered trust. And but I seem to vacillate into thinking I stand in surrendered trust and I just accept all that comes. But I actually realize that kind of passivity is not what surrendered trust is all about. It's in fact, when it comes into your environment, this is yours to interpret and deal with, as you see fit. So that surrendered trust, I think I've been hiding behind that, actually, for quite a while.
I think it's quite possible for those things to happen, that you take an attitude or a quality or any of the processes that we are continuously working on, all of us, on some degree or the other. And yes, you can hide it. It becomes an excuse not to do things. You're so focused on only doing that everything else has passed us by.
Yes.
And your life then doesn't shift, according to the paradigm of things that are shifting.
Yeah, there's no fluidity.
Really incredible watching all of that, So I fully agree there, because that's been my experience. You're so working. Let's just take the quality of love, which is one of the eternal ascension attitudes that Almi teaches in Belvaspatar and some of the other teachings that she gives. And you're so busy in being love and living in love that you actually forget to live. And I was actually pondering on this the other day with some of my previous spiritual paths that I was following as a yogi, traveling the world and doing India, and absolutely magnificent, and I think perfect at that particular time. But that aspect of this is the way it is, just be love, but it's a completely different paradigm that we're in at this moment. And for me, love has actually morphed into a point where you can do what's best for you at any one particular point, and if somebody else isn't appreciating or enjoying that, well, then that's their particular issue to work on. But that shift that happens, that bridge you have to cross to transform into that understanding, to get and to dissolve the old programs, it's work.
That's very real, because they linger. And they creep up unawares. So you think you understand this new perspective, and however, it's sort of almost like the little sting of a scorpion, and it says, that's not the way. We always think of the old perspective of love, where you totally are, sacrifice yourself, a lamb to the slaughter. I
listened to a clip by Almin the other day where she was going, I don't know if it was on Lightwork, it was on Almin, I can't remember, but this clip, she's saying that people expect her to be this gentle, loving, non-commenting person.
Confrontational person, yes.
I've actually had a bit of a lash from her once or twice.
Yes, a little slap on the wrist.
It's always taught me the way that it goes. That look at things in another way. Not a proper way. That's her understanding of where she's at. I mean, it always just pulls you out of that particular aspect. So when those things happen, I giggle a little bit, because she's master at just whacking it out of one.
Absolutely.
In one way or the other.
And she draws that line in the sand. Absolutely. And sometimes you get the feeling that you shouldn't be drawing anything in any sort of sand, but not the case.
I think one of the powerful things that we can do as we dissolve the solid human condition within us is to literally not allow anybody to put you into the box or into a particular box of their own understanding or their own perspective. And I know I continuously have to work on that, and just literally don't let anybody put me into the corner or a box, and it's not like I'm coming out fighting, just not let anybody put me in. Always just shift something within myself as soon as I feel that I'm being put into that particular perspective.
Yeah, because that confines and cribs, and the movement is limited. It affects fluidity, it affects trust, it affects all those sub-personalities.
Yeah, so huge shifts apart. I really think this work on the sub-personalities is really, really immense, and it's an ongoing process that we'll keep discovering. I think the proverbial onion layers have now come to the fact that we've got to the root of the onion now and growing a few more so we can actually understand what it is within ourselves that we have to do, because it's a form of creation that it is creation that we're working with. It's not just about dissolving the known. We are actually stepping into a state where we are recreating something that is not yet been experienced by humanity.
Yeah, and you have to just put one forward in trust. The sub-personalities, I've always spoken of them quite easily enough, but at times they've seemed very distant. But only now am I getting to grips with them and realizing that there are components of the psyche of man, and they are a very real family within. And I've neglected that, and because of that, I've suffered physical pain, and only now am I beginning to understand that family is vital to creating the manifestation of resurrection, and providing. I think because resurrection then leads you into this immaculate white light and the high magic. That is fundamental, those sub-personalities.
But I think the journey, of dissolving the human condition, allowing that which has not yet been experienced into new consciousness. And we can call it all sorts of things. I mean, Almi's journey calls it God consciousness, and then we move it to the new human state, etc., etc. But I think as we move through this dissolving of the human condition, we're discovering more and more of what we know within the self, not realizing that we know it and not realizing that it has actually held us stuck in a program or in a particular situation of being.
And mastery is using it then as a tool to plumb the depths of the unknown.
Really exciting as we go through everything and just work with it. Yeah, so we're going to listen to an audio in a little while from Almin called Takling the Known. It's one of the old ones from the vaults, which came up on the diary this particular week and was shared. And I thought just such a pertinent moment. But we're going to talk a little bit about the aspects of the child and the lost child within the subpersonality of the family. I know for me, for the last 4 or 5 years, it has been an important aspect for me to always look at the inner child. And it's not like I didn't have a physical childhood, but I grew up in a family that were hard workers. We worked weekends, we worked evenings to keep the family businesses together, and that was our form of survival. I mean, there was a program involved in all of that. Whereas what I'm seeing in today's youngsters and children is they're not doing that. Parents are going, oh, well, it's okay, and they're working hard, but they're giving their children everything that they didn't seem to have. And I'm not sure if I'm fully agreeing with all of that.
Well, how often don't you hear that I want my children to have what I didn't have? And there's, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that, but it has to be tempered. Yeah.
Have you, I mean, as a school teacher, you're dealing with youngsters the whole time. Have you noticed any particular behavior patterns within the youngsters in your education environment where you're wanting to say to them, well, listen, you need to grow up, you need to get rid of the childishness whilst you're still a child? Have you been noticing any of that?
Well, it's funny. We were talking today in our staff room, and how often does that not happen when you say to children, come on, you are in matric now. You're not in grade 1. Stop this nonsense. And yes, so there's a strange paradox of being quite grown up and dealing with the things of the world in quite an adult way, and then there's this unparented inner child. And if the inner child is about 5 years old, then that's the level of behavior. Yeah. And we will talk about that later. But I've seen it in myself as well. This inner child that has felt very, very needy, and has just wanted someone to, put their arms around her and just, make it all right again. Yeah. So I can understand. I can understand that need to want to be babied, because I've actually felt that way.
Yeah, well, we've noticed a tremendous amount of people around us, and perhaps it's my age group on a level where this cycle of things is happening. But in this last few days alone, so many people we know have lost their father physically. He's passed away. Wow. And it's not just one, it's one after that. And you can see the impact that this is having on their own children, as well as they're trying to deal with the loss of a parent, which I understand is horrendous. We've had these experiences. Yes, but you work through it eventually, or do you? I mean, that's always another question coming up. But for me, there's an aspect that's going on at this moment where we need to understand that aspect of the inner family, which is the childishness within the inner child, needs to be dissolved.
and that childishness, Paul, is that maybe a need for sort of a distorted attention? Yeah. Is it a kind of manipulation to get the kind of reaction that they want?
Well, we're seeing it 24/7 now, because now within our business here with the music school, we've opened up the academics side. So we've got some youngsters and teenagers in our environment, and some of them are very much in that mode of demanding attention for themselves 24/7 and not getting it. There's a tantrum following.
Yes.
And I was sitting in my office a little earlier as we were just preparing for the show, and one of our teachers, his wife had come in and just brought their young toddler son with him, and they'd been teaching him to talk. And the first word, of course, he says is "mommy." So I'm listening to him running around the building, and he's got a bit of a temper going on him tonight, and he's shouting, "Mommy, mommy." So I just called through and I said, well, you wanted to teach him that word the first, now you've got to deal with what you've taught the child,
The responsibility.
She did learn it first. And he was actually just, Mummy, I want this. Mummy, no, I want this the whole time. She deals with it beautifully.
Yes.
She calms him down and we move on. But it was just exactly that moment where I sat and I sort of hear it all is actually that little child just wants that sustenance from the parent. And I'm feeling that perhaps in our spiritual journey, it's that relationship with the infinite that we're not quite getting into that next step. That's what we want. We want that, I'm going to call it comfort, but comfort zones can be very difficult on a spiritual journey or not quite really applicable if we're going to allow them to continue. But I think there's an aspect of a relationship that we're not experiencing with the infinite.
I love
wanting,
that idea.
Out of it.
And sustenance, I think, without realizing that we have it all. Maybe that's the perception that needs to be cleared, is that it is always there. Paul, you've mentioned something now quite interesting, because there's a phenomenal poem by Rumi, the Persian poet, and he talks about the ant in the granary.
Okay.
And the little ant is in the granary and he's trying to carry out this huge piece of grain and he's frantic about getting it out. But if he just changed his perspective and put the grain of wheat down, he's in a granary that is full of wheat. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe we are frantically holding on to some kind of sustenance instead of realizing that we have everything that we need at any time. But yes, I can understand that perspective of what you've just spoken about.
It's a beautiful story, because I have a mantra when I read, and it's all Almin wisdoms that I've merged together into this story. That sustains me. It keeps me growing.
Yes.
So when I'm really in a state when I've got wobbles going on, I'm using the word wobbles. I think everybody listening will understand the wobble syndrome, where the insecurities hit and things like that go on. Then I've added this aspect of it where I say to myself, I am, self-sovereign, which is a beautiful aspect of Almi's teachings work, but I've added this thing, I'm self-sustaining to it.
Yes.
And I think that we might have tonight hit upon what it is the next step, this next bridge that we are now crossing at the moment. And perhaps it's very daunting for us on a subconscious level.
I think it probably is. We are stepping into what we feel is the unknown, and having to remember and reassimilate. But that mantra reminds me, I don't know where I read this as well, also something about, there were 3 or 4 statements where my being is my sustenance, I am abundance, I attract abundance, I master or deal with abundance wisely. And that does bring great...
Well, that was last week's Almin's rune mantra for the week.
That's where it came from.
I printed it and I've been keeping that. So that's
it's next to my bed as well. Before I go to bed, I read through that quickly.
Really beautiful. Good. Just to keep all of that working with along the way. Let's talk a little bit about this week's mantra that we've got, because I think that relates to a lot of the discussion that we are having, Diane, and it's the weekly prediction from Almin as a rune is chosen, and then she gives us the explanation of it from January the 23rd to the 29th. It's called Living in a Space. The rune is 6.28, New Possibilities, attracting possibilities through creating a space of unspecified hope. And then she explains, release the thought that all life takes place in the physical. The time has come to release the thought that the living of inner space is dysfunctional and introverted. We're speaking about that.
Yes.
When all our attention focuses on outer space, cosmic changes register in the body as discomfort and disease. In a multidimensional life in which inner space is just as important as outer space, cosmic change registers as change of awareness instead. This creates gentle and graceful change externally. So I'm saying, by George, we've got it. I think we've got the understanding at this moment of, that's what's actually emerging, and perhaps not wanting to release some of it on a deep subconscious level, but still understanding that we want that support. Perhaps it's like a child walking, and we're not letting go of the support of the mother, mummy, until we can walk. But it doesn't work like that. I mean, we literally are creating the next paving block as we put our foot down, it appears, and that takes the surrender and trust to a completely different level. And I think last year we spoke a little bit about some of those tightrope moments that we've
we did mention that all the steps that we've walked prior to that moment mean nothing. It's that moment on the tightrope, that step that we are about to take.
It takes a great deal, I think, of... I mean, you use the word courage, but it's far more than that. It's just absolute trust in yourself and your relationship with the infinite as one who is expressing the infinite through oneself all the time. And I think, for me, I keep wavering between that aspect of it and full surrender to letting the infinite flow through me to actually wanting to do my own thing, which is that spoiled inner child. But I'm seeing that within myself.
Yeah, but I've always had a thing over many, many years. I've always wondered if I would ever be courageous enough when the moment came. And then I thought, and I realized with Almin's work, is that you only need courage if you are in an aggressive, hostile environment. You do not need courage if everything is benevolent. And then that took the pressure off.
Okay.
All of a sudden, I felt I didn't need to be brave all the time, because you only have to be brave when there's an obstacle or something that is aggressive or hostile to overcome. So there's really no need for that kind of courage.
Form of courage.
Yes.
And then I think also, as we're going along, we've got to understand a lot of those qualities that we've learned on a spiritual level also belong to an old paradigm and another reality. Yes. And that reality no longer exists. So we are still living in the value system associated with those particular qualities, but learning what the new... Let's just take courage, for example.
Yes.
Learning what the new deal is around courage on a new form. I mean, for some days it takes, and Almin has even admitted, getting up out of bed one day, the only way you can get out of bed is to put one foot out and put it on the floor, and the next one will follow. So if that's what she said...
If she says that, we can understand that sometimes
what
it's
her
not.
experiences have been, absolutely incredible.
When you talked about us dealing with something that's already gone and done, I just got an image of candy floss. Because, you grab it, you put it in your mouth, the sweetness remains, but then it's gone. There's nothing. And yes, at this particular perspective, we're talking not about sweetness, but about the chaos and the destructuring. But it's actually done. It's just this after effect that is still lingering.
Very much so, because it's still part of the memory. I've noticed with the teachings of that Almin brings in, she'll say something this year, and 5 years down the line, you see it manifesting.
Yes.
And I've seen that. And perhaps it just you need to work through all of that. It takes that certain amount of time to dissolve it.
Yes.
And I'm seeing this path of mastery more of learning to be able to dissolve these things far quicker through qualities, through maybe courage, through surrender, through whatever it is that we are having to work with.
But how fortunate are we that we have these tools to enable that process to manifest more quickly.
Really incredible, when we sit and look at it. What I love about the radio show is, like, if you're in with me or we have another guest or something, sometimes we have these eye-opening moments, and we have a few moments of dead radio time as we pause and we
think through this.
There it is, So we hope our listeners can hear all of that. And
yes, I hope you can.
So we're definitely into that time frame. Nico's just told me that the clip that we had from Almin actually hasn't been loaded correctly onto the system. So we're still having electronic and technical problems. So we won't be able to play that tonight, but never mind, we will just talk about what we're going to talk about. Have you seen some of the clips where Almin's talking about the abduction of the children on the to take the colonies to Mars?
Yes.
Now, here we are now in a point where it is not believable what I'm hearing any longer. I'm not one who's going to say Almin is this and Almin is all of that. I like her to take me to the point where I go, no way, Jose. This is not.
This
no
seems
longer
a bridge
making
too far.
We've lost the plot now, and we've gone completely into spaces and processes I have no clue or I don't want to know about. Maybe one of the two is going on there. But I'll let it be, and I know in time I'll look at it and I'll go, there it is and there it is. Something is being ripped up at this moment. The roots are being ripped up for something there along the way. What's your... we've got that clip, so we'll listen to it in a little while maybe and then talk about it. But what's your immediate take on the US government actually creating states to go, a place to go to Mars to create a colony?
Sure. You know, Paul, initially I also thought, hang on.
Yeah. Okay.
But I've found with our men that the ridiculous or the apparent ridiculousness of certain statements always dissolve and the truth of the situation appears. So I'm always quite happy to, as you say, let it be, because there's no doubt that within a period of time it rears its head again,
all of that,
and it's accurate.
So that's surrender and trust to me, because I do exactly the same thing, and I love those. No way, lady, where are we going with all of this? But I know by now, I've learned enough, I hope, to be able to trust it enough to know that we are actually going down a path which we have not yet even conceived or possible, except perhaps in the realms of science fiction on some level.
Yes. Well, Paul, the thing is, we that's also part of our programming. Our mind immediately, that deals with the known,
absolutely.
says, don't be ridiculous, this cannot be happening. And yet in the past, these myths have been debunked. And, even I think we were talking about giants, and lo and behold,
there it was.
Up it comes. And yes, there have been strange, footprints and habitats discovered.
Excuse me.
And that makes me wonder that perhaps the mind can work as a tyrant, can be used as a tool, but sometimes we have to just let it be and allow it to unfold.
Along the way, because we haven't got all the full information, and I don't think our consciousness is quite able to contain all that information, which is why it takes time for us to process it.
Yes. And you know what? If I'm thinking of this tachyon energy that Almin is speaking about, that is a particle. It's supposedly, in terms of scientific terms, it's supposedly a particle that goes as fast as the speed of light. And if that is just a theory, and supposedly a theory, there's no reason why these supposed theories of children being abducted for colonization, also it has its roots in impossibility. However, it will be manifested, I'm sure, in the concrete as well.
Well, I'm thinking, yes. I'm thinking on some level, perhaps, and this is a question I'm putting out for us tonight, and perhaps our listeners may have a comment or two to add to it, but I'm thinking that the programming that we've been talking about, saying the spoilt brat parts of the inner child or whatever we got going on, are actually foreign programmings. They belong not within the profoundness of something that is whole. Yes. As the whole inner family grows and works, and these are foreign programmings. Yes. And I would look at Mars as being a foreign world. And why would they just abduct children? Why is the comment about children going, this has to have an aspect with the inner child? Why are they not taking suitable adults that are ready to breed?
Yes, exactly.
And can be more self-sustaining? There has to be a thing about the slave aspect of the child, and we're going straight back to the slave species of the god, we've had
we've talked about that.
And knowing full well that we are also slave species until we attain, or shall I say, own our own God consciousness.
Own our own divinity.
That's dissolving all the old human conditions that have no longer a relevance in today's world.
And we've been slaves to belief systems. But also what I've realized about the inner child aspect is that you cannot look at it in isolation. You've got to look, because if the inner child is feeling needy, is feeling alone, is feeling homeless, then other aspects of the subpersonalities are not performing in their wholeness. So you've got to look at the nurturer who is loving and providing a safe haven, who perhaps is a strict judgmental parental role.
Perhaps.
Even the inner warrior. Paul, as I said, I was saying over the last couple of weeks, I've felt this inner child crying out, just wanting someone to parent me and take hold of me,
yes,
put their arms around me, and I'm thinking, really being this parentless adult is not easy. But then I've also realized that this inner warrior, I've been fighting battles externally. My inner warrior has not been looking at guarding the child from thoughts, guarding the inner family. This warrior, my warrior, has been fighting external battles. And then that reading that you had just now about cosmic changes manifest in pain and disease. Well, that's exactly what I've been doing. Focusing on the outer, and the inner warrior has only been fighting out there.
Well, there's two things now. Michelle has just asked us online to just repeat what these sub-personalities are. And the four of them that Almeen really works with in her work is the inner child, is the inner warrior, is the inner nurturer, and the inner sage.
Absolutely.
And absolutely, I agree with you there, Diane, is that when we are only focusing on the neediness of one as something that is lacking, trying to fix it, we are going to avoid the work that the others do, because each one has to work together. But I'm also looking at the aspect of, I don't know when she said this, I don't remember times and she said this then. I just retain what I have to at any point, but she said that the inner child is central to the whole family. I think that that is such a valid point, and this is why it is so obvious for us at this moment that the inner child is really doing what needs to be done and coming up, and everything that doesn't belong in its great abundant consciousness is not, it can't continue, so it has to be dissolved, and the only way it can be dissolved is through us, through us realizing,
through us doing our work. And in fact, Paul, we were talking, Almeen talks about the abandoned children and the age of darkness and the dark ages of abandoned children, and if you're actually listening, Michelle, she also talks about work that needs to be done with the inner child. And there is actually a list of principles of fullness. And Almeen calls it a mystical secrets of attracting abundance. And you can actually Google that and you can actually download it. But for all our visitors, I'm going to read a few that I've underlined, because this inner child and this feeling of feeling alone and abandoned, lost and lonely one, is exactly how I've felt. I found these principles really are supportive and expressive, because the healthy, balanced inner child, is filled with imaginative zeal and joy, and wants to know, what is in store for me. Whereas the inner child that is lost and lonely just wants to withdraw, and that's what fear does. You want to withdraw. You want to stay away, curl up in a little ball.
It's an interesting conversation, because annually, as we go through here at the music school, students come and go, as they do at every education place. But towards the end of the year, all sorts of excuses materialize in certain of the students through their parents as to why they can't continue. And yet that particular youngster had such, in many cases, such incredible potential, which is never going to be achieved in terms of their abilities right now. And they're removed, and it's the parent always giving the reason why this or that can't happen. And all it takes is that nurturer to say, this is the way we're going to, let's work together to get it done.
We can do
to
that.
Reach our potential. So we also see that going on here.
Yes.
But these principles of fullness that we're speaking about, I know they're on Almeen Diary, I think, and they are searchable. So for our listeners, you can just go onto almeendiary.com and you can just search for the principles of fullness and their aspects of abundance. Was there one or two that we could share there, Diane?
Yes.
Because I think something about the inner child was in there somewhere.
There,
is that right?
There are. I'm going to read a couple of these principles. The ones that I've underlined. Number 6 is recognizing that I am all. Number 12, loving the eternal journey with non-attachment to outcome. And that's what I was working on, trying to, arrange some kind of outcome that I wouldn't be.
The old favorite, isn't it? To suit your own.
To suit myself.
Put yourself in the box of, it's right now.
Yes, and I'm going to be safe.
Yeah.
Willingness to receive through releasing judgments of worthiness, accepting the divine heritage of the fullness of eternity. I love number 16, replacing the memories of lack with glad expectation. Number 17, I've put NB next to it, emotional self-sovereignty through the supported expression of the sub-personalities. And then the last one is the guiltless enjoyment of effortless, boundless abundance. I just wanted to read this, Paul, which I thought, these 18 principles dissolve the feelings of lack, and they are sort of concentrated in this statement: immeasurable gratitude for the incomparable gift of individuated existence.
Let's go through that again, please.
I'll say it again. Immeasurable gratitude for the incomparable gift of individuated existence.
Wow. Also very profound, just the wording itself.
Yes.
It's just so incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
This gift of individuation is so immeasurable that and all these principles emphasize that. And then there is the shift away from feeling alone and isolated and homeless.
Yeah.
All of that is gone.
Do you think that the attitude of the inner child when it's in its, can I use the word brat mode?
Yes.
Please, listeners, tell me another word if you wish, but it's the way I'm seeing it going on. And yes, my own experiences within myself have been in that neediness. It's absolutely there. Do you think that the inner child is still trying to measure its worth?
Yes.
According to, I'm not going to finish the sentence. I think everybody gets...
Definitely.
Yeah, that's come out of tonight's show. I think we should close the radio show, go have tea and stare at each other for a while at the hugeness of this.
I think that is huge,
you know?
Because how often do we feel unworthy? And it stems from that inner child. You know, you were talking about your childhood and how parents were working and I mean, that's often what happens, and parenting is difficult. For me, physically, I always looked grown up. So at 9, I was physically a woman. So I was always given tasks that an adult would have been given, and I loved it. But I never ever played. And that's something that I know I need to work on, because everybody dumped responsibilities onto me, and I took them gladly, but never enjoyed that carefree, light-hearted, joyful experience.
And I think that's part of the journey. I actually had a conversation with Jan of Team Almeen this week on email, and she used exactly the same things, where she says she doesn't differentiate between work and play.
Yes.
It all happens simultaneously.
Effortlessly.
And I think that paradigm of that spiritual teaching where let's work and then rest.
Yes.
Or play, work hard, play hard. That's a program.
Yes, it is.
Because if you should be having fun whilst you're working, and also working whilst there shouldn't be a difference in any of those things.
Yeah. Those limits have been blown out of the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's also a lesson for us all to apply, and to you have the lightness of each moment and respond to what is really needed. But I love those principles of fullness. I think
we can work with them.
Those so incredibly beautifully. So there you go, everyone, a connection for you to work with. I want to tell you a little bit about our own child, Zia's dream. We had supper earlier, and then she comes and she says, Uncle Paul, I want to tell you about my dream. But she's having really tough dreams, and there's nightmares, and there's all sorts of things going on for her, and we see they've been influencing her. And I keep saying, stop watching those horror movies, But a kid, or whatever, they're going to do what they're going to do until they've learned otherwise. It's what they want to do. But it's been influencing her to such a point where she's been needy with us. And then she doesn't want to go to her room. And now we're talking about an almost 18-year-old young lady, dissolving into the childhood again. And so we know something has been going on, because she's a good monitor for us to look at. And she said, Uncle Paul, I had a dream about you, and I thought, oh no. I kind of preempted it a little bit, and I thought, here we go, it's going to be a rough dream now, we've got to just talk through it a little. She says, you came into my room, in my dream, and you looked at me, and you had a diary in your hand, and the diary was 2017. And she said, and you know where you got that? She got it at the store up the road. She says, and the store's called Coronation Stores, which we have just a few blocks up the road. And I said to you, you have no idea what you've just said
Yes.
to me.
Yes.
That's exactly the process that we're discussing tonight, is that this is the year for your own coronation and your own self-sovereignty coming in. Write
Sure.
it in your diary. You've got the whole diary to work with. So, as we enter now the new cosmic year and the Chinese year of the rooster, I think we're going to see a lot of these processes come up for us. And Almin's already said it's going to be a very challenging and adventurous year for us. So I think we need to also look at that and roll with it as we can. But that, to me, just highlighted absolutely where we're looking at. And yes, this is the moment to do all of that.
And then lo and behold, I mean, we have in the early part of January the inauguration of
last week.
Trump.
That's right. And we're going to talk about this in another
Yes.
radio show
Yes.
because we've got other information as well. But so many people refer to him as childish and immature, and he's got all of this going, and he just gets what he wants. And apparently, there's so many fake news going on. I don't even want to read it now.
I know.
But the aspect comes up where he said that he's declared the presidential inauguration day a day of devotion. And I'm going, isn't that interesting from that particular aspect?
Yes,
So,
and an unusual comment.
Very unusual comment.
And when we do talk about that, I mean, the prayer apparently was from the Book of Solomon, and emphasis on the divine feminine and the divine light. But that's another topic for another program.
We'll certainly walk about
Yes.
inaugurations, and the divine feminine will work with all
Yes.
of that. So but you're right. But is the aspect of the inner child now needing the divine feminine to come in to
Yes.
be able to hold its space? Mommy.
Yes.
And in several radio shows,
Yes.
we've talked about this in the past. Last year, we even had a clip where a kid was going, "Mommy, I don't wanna." It was like, and I was remembering
That's
that
right,
this morning.
yes.
Thinking, this is really ironic, the way that we've seen all of that coming through.
But
And
it's almost like a full circle.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe next week we'll talk a little bit about this, and then we'll also ask Nico to come and discuss things with us about that song,
Yes.
Straatkind, which translated in English is Street Child,
Yes.
and the frequency of the work that is doing. So we've sent it to Almin, and we're hoping to get a response because Jan has given us a great feedback about the frequency of it. And we know we're onto something here when Nico comes up with an incredible song of
Yes.
that level. So we'll invite him then at that particular point.
I think that will
to
be
come and
wonderful.
discuss and
You
share
remember-
how these songs just suddenly appear, and he's been good at all of that.
And he's very happy to sort of be in the
Yeah.
background, but I think 2017 he's going to have to come to the
Gonna
fore
come
in
to
his
the fore a
diary.
little bit as the master that he is. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to play some music by Nico now. We've got a poem that's written by a guy called David White, and it's called Through a Window, written in Salt Lake City, February 2 years ago. Would you read it for us?
Oh, yeah, sure, Paul.
Thank you. So it's called Everything is Waiting for You. And I think
Okay.
it just absolutely highlights what we're discussing tonight.
Okay, do
It's
you want me
not
to
too
read
long,
it
yeah. So
now?
Nick is going to play some of his music, Pathways to the Moon, in the background.
And then I will read
and
it.
you can read it. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So when you're ready.
Everything is waiting for you. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. As if light were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely, even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you courage. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. Everything is waiting for you. And this is a poem by David White.
Absolutely
Wow, does that
beautiful.
not mirror what we've
Yeah,
talked
exactly what we're
about?
talking about. It's absolutely incredible what comes
Yeah.
in for us to be able to work with and
this
have
weight of
gratitude.
aloneness, Paul, is
Yeah.
that not just astounding?
Really incredible.
And also to have come in, almost as always, quite per chance.
Absolutely.
Wow, that is
Per
beautiful.
chance, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to this audio by Almeen. It is a video that she's posted about abducting children for the colony of Mars. Let's listen to that and see where we go.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
But these areas, I've been wondering, who are they putting in there? Because I couldn't see them putting any adults in there or using anybody from our existing penitentiaries, but they are putting children in there. There are large numbers each year of children disappearing. Some go into sex trade, individual pedophiles, but not large numbers like that. They are captured by governments under every state in America. There are, in fact, these underground facilities, and there they are being taught to become totally obedient to the government. Totally obedient. They are being groomed to be tomorrow's colonizers of Mars. And this is something we had to work with, because this indicates a captured child, that's inner child, captured under the surface, underground, and one that has to obey the other subpersonalities. The adult says, look, I'm busy with important work. I can't play right now. Get back in your prison. But I just wanted to ride the bike. No, get back in the prison. I need to do this and this and this and this tonight. It's being taught to listen to the other subpersonalities as if it doesn't have a voice. So we have worked on this, on seeing where there is problems with us on a day-by-day basis, expressing our inner child.
You're back in studio with Radio Belvas Bata South Africa. You're in studio with Diane and Paul. Nico's just mentioned that we are having some technical difficulties and signals dropping. So if you haven't got the whole program, please bear with us. Alternatively, we can send you any of these clips if you do request them. Unfortunately, we are still trying to work through our technical issues after the lightning strike in December, and we're not fully back up in the studio as yet, and we are working off laptops and temporary mics. But yes, the show goes on, and we're here, and we're certainly not stopping. So yeah, Diane, huge conversation there from Diane, heart-wrenching moments. The horror of some things I just don't even want to really feel about. I suppose that is part of the process, because it is a certain reality that is happening out there. But I think the protectiveness of the inner child is also tantamount to what we're discussing right now tonight.
It is a concern that so many children do go missing, and as you say, there's some horrendous points of discussion there and horrendous experiences. But we can look at the inner child within us and hope to parent more effectively and hope to be, and try and create some kind of fluidity.
You were saying earlier, yes. They've all got to be in absolute balance, working together on a feminine and masculine level, all functioning together around the inner child. And the work is ongoing. It's just never going to stop for us.
Yes.
We're just going to get more and more insights as our awareness develops and develop depth as all of these things go. And I think that's part of the self-sovereignty and the self-government of self, that we no longer permit that to really happen.
Paul, you know what I think I also read somewhere where it is important now for the 8 extraordinary meridians, the 12 ordinary meridians, all of that to be brought back into play and to be used as the powerful tools they are, because that does promote, manifestation of the resurrection state, the immaculate white light. So all these tools we have, we talked before about the spinal affirmations. There is so much that we have been given.
And Belvaspata as a healing modality itself, along with the volume 2s and 3s of Belvaspata, where we are literally using oils on the meridians at the same time.
Yes.
And Almin refers to a lot of those processes and the healings that go on in terms of that. There's a whole lot of teachings about the modes, and I can't remember the exact courses. About 2 years ago, we might need to just look it up. But she details a lot of it as to the emotions that you experience and the meridian that is out.
The distorted
that is
emotion.
Classic Chinese teaching,
Yes.
But we have to do that work and understand that a distorted emotion, what it is. And another bit of help and assistance, I think that's just come through. If everybody goes on to spiritualjourneys.com, Almin has just had posted up there the human and the God Merkaba. And the aspect of human hormones and how they are programmed to make us behave in certain ways. And then she's giving methods there of spinning those particular Merkabas that will then dissolve all of those particular hormonal issues, which has to do with the feminine and the masculine anyway.
And also, Paul, we have all of this, and we also slip in to the belief system, as with time, that this happens A, and then B happens, and then you work with that. But if, as with time, it's exponential, it's like that standing waveform, then this is all happening at once.
Absolutely incredible.
Yes.
Jack Goodman's just posted on our WhatsApp group that today time is standing still. And I stood for a moment. I said, yes, actually it is. It just feels like there's just stopped.
Yes. And that linear time is no more.
And yet the whole world is pushing you to come into action, to do things. And I've been resisting that. So I think we've got a link here between the inner child not wanting to do stuff, because I asked my kid to do things and it's not going to happen. It's going to happen in their time, and in their way. That is a very defined way. And it's not just mine. I'm examining everybody's,
every aspect of that.
So I see a lot of that happening, but I think it's very much that time has certainly stopped, and we need to acknowledge and have gratitude for the exponential experience within all of that.
And I always battled with the understanding, I suppose, the mind trying to grapple with, a standing waveform or exponential growth. I tussle with that. But if I keep in my mind and I see in my mind a wave, it doesn't displace or replace anything. It simply moves and changes its movement. And so time is never going anywhere. Much the same as our journey.
And the ocean just brings the next wave, and the next wave is different to the following wave, and etc.
Yes. Like our eternal journey. It is exponential.
There's a poetic perspective in all of that, and I think to live in that is incredibly powerful, and that is certainly part of Almi's teachings in so many different methods. That brings me into another question of discussion, and I'd like to just ask you what you think about it.
You always do this because we're not prepared for this.
But we don't need to be prepared.
No, you're right.
It's all incredible discussion. And,
absolutely.
We're real in this moment, and I'd love to ask our listeners to also give some viewpoints, what they think and they feel. So please, everyone, just send us your comments either on Facebook or on Spreaker.com's website page, which you're on at this moment, listening to the show. whether it's in podcast form, we can watch it afterwards or listen to it right now. But literally, Almin talks about having traveled into the future.
Yes.
And last week I was discussing how I realized that the sigils that I'd been sealing had been pulling me were actual ways of traveling into the future.
Like a vehicle.
Okay. And I'm seeing that some of the work that's coming in now in terms of the new time maps and the lines running through them for this year have completely shifted, and those are the wheels of time travel as well. So we're going to see that ability develop within all of us. I'm just thinking now that when we talk about parallel realities, and that's just come up in one of the Almin comments now in Almin Diary or Spiritual Journeys. I'm not quite clear. I'll find that information if I have to. But the comment is there about, where it is, there's a new web event coming up with Almin in March. So I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And one of them is about understanding parallel realities. And I'm going, well, look, if Almin has stated that in this current timeline, this is what manifests. So I already have an issue with that in terms of if we are exponential, there's no timeline. But I understand we're still working with what was and dissolving that, and that will then allow what is to come forward. We spoke about that earlier. So I get all of that. But then I'm going, then there has to be other timelines and other parallel realities. What would happen if one of those timelines came into this timeline that we're in at the moment? It would change everything for us. And that for me is quite concerning, because once again I'm putting myself in the position where Almina said for the next 300 years we've got this and this and going, and her teachings are safe, and etc., and we're moving from the age of the banker into the age of the scientist. We're moving into the year of high magic. Yes, 100%, I get all of that. I can see all of that happening. But what would it take if just something from another parallel reality came in with their timeline? Would it shift everything back into another reality altogether, or would it merge on a masculine and feminine level? And why am I asking the question? Well, I don't know. But I've also seen enough in the past within myself when I get these thoughts and experiences that there's some reality to it which we'll see as we're going along. I mean, you share it with Almeen and she will develop it or add other people's insights to it and then give you the fuller story. And that's one of the things that I'm really working with.
Paul, I'd have to think about that. But if I'm thinking of parallel realities, and I'm thinking of loaves of bread or a loaf of sliced bread standing on its head, and if each slice of bread represents a parallel reality, I would imagine, I can't see why another reality couldn't slip into ours, because after all, particles hit and collide and move off, but they never forget the exchange that they have undergone. So if parallel realities are slipping into ours and we're slipping into theirs, it's never forgotten. The influence is never forgotten. So your question is, how would they influence this reality? But I don't know. If this reality is fluid and it can be altered and it can be changed.
But they all have to be part of the matrix in terms of it's a reality that we're experiencing. If we're experiencing, it's not real, then it's part of the dream, it's part of the matrix. Our job is to dissolve the matrix so that we're creating a reality which is non-dream state, that it is just a expression of the infinite, that we're all in that state of absolute oneness, perhaps on an individuated level, yes. So these are just thoughts that
I'd love to think about that.
Examine it a bit.
Yes, I'd love to do that, because I can't explain it off the cuff.
But let's bear in mind, the question is there, and where there's a question, there's an answer. So I've also learned that with Almin, is that don't worry about the fact there's a question, know that something is coming up to provide insights with it.
And that's happened more than once with you.
So very, very much. Well, I think with all of us, you get that flash of something and then you have to work through it. And that is part of dissolving the illusion of what we assume life to be. So this is all going around what's called the High Magic of Time Maps. It's a 2-day web event by the Seer Almin on Saturday the 25th and Sunday the 25th and 26th of March. And we are to discover the hidden information beyond the obvious. So this will be interesting. It's to experience these meditations as Almin guides us into becoming familiar with the wonders of parallel realities.
Ah, well,
So there we've got something coming there.
that might be
that
worth
might give us those
attending
particular
as well.
answers.
Yes.
And understand the mystical network that supports your sacred journey. That would be exciting.
The
whole
mystical network.
Mystical
Yes.
network.
I think that may be something to really consider taking part
Really
in.
incredible.
Yes.
Diane, we've come to the end of the show. We've
Wow.
had an hour together. Thank you very much for all
Thank
of that.
you. Thank you
really
so much,
exciting,
Paul.
and thank you for sharing. And we are going to now work with a beautiful track that Jan actually sent to me. So thank you very much, Jan, for sharing that. And it's from David Attenborough from the BBC, and he's narrating The Wonderful World, which is an incredible song. It was incredible, by the way. Zia came in to my room and she said, Uncle Paul, which is your favorite song? Is it Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World? And that was yesterday.
Wow,
and then we get all of this
isn't
going
that
to
amazing?
go with it along the way. But our final comment is just something from the mystic and seer Almin. And she says here that when life supports us, it is often fluid, unexpected, and not easily discerned. Fluid support indicates we have aligned ourselves with the will of the infinite and the source of power. And that's by the great mystic and seer Almin. So today we've had poetry, we've talked about all sorts of things. Next week we want to talk a little bit about the sacred feminine and the inauguration process and the destruction of society, because the world did change last week dramatically, and everybody aware is going to change. We're just waiting to see what one person's going to say to make all those changes. So, and he has a role to play in the world,
Yes.
but I don't think that's any different from what we're experiencing in our country with our... Here's the bias, supposed government, or the government that we do have. So a time for self-government definitely coming in, and lots of exciting things. Diane, thank you for sharing with us today and joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Good night to everyone.
And good night to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright, blessed days, dark, sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colours of a rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Quite simply wonderful.
You've been listening to Radio Balbaspata, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Balbaspata or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@balbaspata.co.za or add comments to our page on Spreaker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude and trust. and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.